So we want to welcome everybody to James's AMA. For some of you that may not know James, James previously worked at Google. He marks himself on Twitter as nerd centrist, interested in open discussions and improving the world by fixing perverse incentive structures. He's also the author of Pro Diversity and the Google Memo. And again, you will see his website and his information in the James Damore AMA. You can follow him on Twitter. You can get more information. And I know a lot of you are interested in supporting what he does. So check it out. And James, again, we are very appreciative of you coming here. I think a lot of people wanted to have you in an open forum so that they can ask you questions about not only you, but what you stand for, and also the state of social media, state of the internet, where it's going, and really get a deep dive, pull the onion back, really see, what's going on besides what's on Fox, what's on, CNN and everything else, and really understand how everything works. So, without further ado, everyone, I want to remind everybody in the AMA channel right above, you can ask any questions, and we will try to get to as many as possible. And James will try to answer as many as we can. So, James, I'm going to hand it off to you. Give a little background, obviously, information about yourself, and then we will open it up to questions, and the users will be continuously posting. So, James, the floor is yours.
All right. Hey, thanks. I'll try to keep it short just to ensure that we can go through the questions. So, yeah, I always been really interested in just understanding the world in general. And so, in college, I just took at random classes and had a couple majors. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I went to grad school, and then I discovered, these coding challenges and these algorithm puzzles that I really liked. So I decided to do some random coding competitions with that. Google found me. And then after 2 years in grad school, I decided to just go to Google. And, I really like Google. The benefits are great, and, they are changing the world. But I felt like there were some major problems in our culture. And so after 4 years, I decided to, give some feedback on some of the diversity programs. And it was that memo that eventually got me fired a couple months ago.
All right, great. Thank you, James.
Mhm.
So we're going to open up the first question. This is a user-submitted question, and the question is, James, do you think the data that is being collected by social media companies is helping, hurting the world?
Uh, at least for now, I think it is helping, but there's definitely a lot of potential for dystopian worlds to be developed through this. And so it's really dangerous. And yeah, there's some alternatives where you can actually sell your data to companies directly. And so it would get around the middleman. And those are at least something to look into.
All right, great. The next question comes from user Wally, and it says, James, you are most well known as the Google Memo instead of James Damore. Some may even consider you a one-hit wonder. Is this what you ultimately wanted, or do you have something greater you want to accomplish?
Yeah, I definitely would like to accomplish more than just this, especially considering how much the media has misportrayed things. So this wasn't my initial goal, but now that I'm in this position, I definitely want to fight more for some of the problems that I've seen.
Thanks, James. Next question comes from user Machiavelli, and the question is, James, do you believe the culture of diversity at Google is an outlier in the tech industry?
No, it's definitely not an outlier. All the major companies have a very similar PC social justice culture.
Did, can you elaborate on what exactly that means to you?
Mhm. Uh, so I, there's this basic idea that there are these disparities that we see in representation in tech, and the social justice answer to this is that it's all due to discrimination. And therefore, to fix this wrong that we see, we need to discriminate in our hiring, our promotions, and just in how, in general, we treat different people. And that's really strong in tech and just the general media narrative currently.
All right, great. Thanks, James. So the next question comes from a user, and the question is, James, what exactly did your 9 to 5 job consist of at Google, and what exactly did you do?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so I worked in search infrastructure, specifically image and video search. So I worked, throughout the entire stack except the front end for search. So once we got the, URL for the website to when we downloaded it, analyzed the contents, uh, extracted image and video links, extract and downloaded those and analyzed their contents, and then put those into the index. That was my main job.
All right, great. Next question is, what do you see the echo chamber at Google evolving into?
Uh, I mean, I think if nothing changes, then the echo chamber will only become more extreme because dissenting voices will continue to be silenced. And the most extreme aspect of this social justice stuff is just requiring equal outcome for everything. And so we'll be totally blind to, oh, this person worked more, therefore maybe they should get a higher raise, and just insisting that all disparities between even individual employees must be due to some unfairness or injustice. And that system itself can't work because the incentives for the employees will just be to not actually do anything.
Thanks, James. Next question comes from user Too High to Comply. He is a moderator. Uh, and James, the question is, do you believe Google and Alphabet has now become theoretically the largest lobbying firm in the world?
Hmm. It's definitely possible. I don't know, how much money exactly they spend in politics, but I think there is something that's different between Google and maybe some of the like more traditionally evil lobbying firms like, oil companies or something, simply because the current narrative is like, these oil companies are obviously evil or something, but the employees at Google really truly believe that Google is, you know, unanimously good and can't do anything that is evil. And so, it has tons of extremely smart people that are working night and day to promote Google, basically. And that isn't necessarily happening for these other companies.
Thanks, Jim. Next question comes from a user James. Do you feel that Google favors the left with their search results?
So I think that it's definitely possible. They don't really necessarily have something that predicts is this article on the left or right, and then gives a boost to those on the left. But there are different ways in which this bias can come up in search results. And basically, one thing that was happening in when we were looking at fake news was we would identify all these fake news articles, but like nearly all of the ones that we would identify would be the pro-Trump ones, and we wouldn't identify any of the pro-Hillary ones. And so our classifier for what would be fake news would simply, not work for the other half of them. And same with whenever we try to classify, is this a reputable news source? We'll automatically discount any of the far right ones, but never the far left ones.
Great. To kind of expand on that a little bit,
Uh,
essentially Google almost didn't know. And now just a question. Essentially, Google didn't have to throw themselves under the bus, and that is the top of the food chain at Google. They didn't have to throw themselves under the bus because it was almost create. I mean, employees were doing it themselves, right? I mean, because if you're already leaning left and the whole organization is leaning left, Google doesn't even have to say you have to do it because they can empower people that will do it anyway without saying it. It sounds like.
yeah, so there's definitely some top-down stuff, which would be the executive saying a certain thing, but then there's also this bottom-up organic bias that happens, and that stuff is really hard to detect.
Right. Next question comes from Even, and the question is: did you experience a change in the culture of Google in the time you were employed there?
Uh, it's hard to say. I think it was about the same, really. Uh, I I was coming already from grad school, which has a similar culture already. So I feel like it was pretty similar. Maybe it got more extreme, just uh, but it wasn't qualitatively different.
So when you joined, I mean, what would you explain the one difference as? Just they were smaller?
Yeah, they were smaller, and I guess I just didn't know. It was only after I had been at the company for long enough, had enough conversations, and had actually gotten into some of these more secret meetings that I was able to realize that what they're saying in these public meetings isn't actually what's happening in the private meetings.
All right, moving on to the next question, James. Comes from user philosophist. And is James. Would you think it's fair if a corporation like Google were to pay higher wages to those with greater achievements, but spent more time and money trying to help and relate to employees who achieved the least rather than constantly threatening them with potentially being fired?
I, yeah, I definitely think that identifying employees that have potential and then investing in those employees which may be currently underperforming is smart. I I, I don't agree with their current method of simply grouping everyone in by gender or by ethnicity and saying on average this group performs less than this one, therefore we need to start boosting this other group, though, because that really gets into stereotyping people, and it can only really create or it has the potential to create tensions between the groups.
Thanks, James. Next question is comes from server owner, and it is Fonzo. James, if you could relive the day you created the memo, would you do it again and stand in solidarity with what you?
Mm. I I guess first I clarify that I wrote it over multiple days, and it was actually a month before it went viral. After we had been talking with multiple people, and I had had some actual constructive feedback. But specifically, would I do the whole thing over? I would definitely change some things, and but it's hard to really regret this because I feel like it needed to be said, and that eventually there will be some good that comes out of this.
All right, great. Next question. That is from Rock. And how was life day to day at Google. So I think essentially what they kind of want to hear about is, were there these sleeping things where people could go? Was there all you can eat breakfast buffets? And you know what I mean? Was there all this cool stuff that everybody hears about?
Yeah, there's definitely all those benefits. So there's free food, there's nap pods, there's massages, there's gyms, and all these great benefits. I think the majority of Googlers don't use them as that much. I mean, everyone eats at Google, but uh, people rarely use all of the benefits. And there will be these pool tables and foosball tables that just rarely get used. Uh, I like day to day. It's basically just answering and sending out emails, and then coding a little bit, and then maybe writing some design docs, and always these boring meetings. But so day to day, the benefits aren't that relevant except for the free food.
Okay, what was there endless bacon? That is the real question.
Uh, so one interesting thing about the free food, which is different than a lot of the other tech companies, is that Google's free food was they specifically tried to make it very healthy, and so they wouldn't necessarily have bacon. But Facebook, in contrast, would have candy all over the place and probably bacon every day.
They're like, "Hey, just get as fat as you can. We know you won't do anything social. You'll keep working, right?" Uh, I'm kidding. All right. So the next question comes from Stevie, and that is, what was the process of being fired from Google? So I think from the second you sent that memo to the second, who did you talk to? Who let you go? How did that work? Was there a severance? What happened after?
Mm.
Did you get follow up emails? So on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, after it went viral, I did talk to HR, and I told them that this was protected concerted activity. I was complaining about working conditions. I was pointing out potentially illegal things that were happening, and I also mentioned that this is NLRB, so National Labor Relations Board type stuff, and that I had filed a claim. And then uh, that was on the Friday before I got fired, and then on Monday they just called me up and said, hey, you've been fired for perpetuating gender stereotypes, and they wouldn't really. That was the end of the discussion.
So if you could have said, if you could choose between two things you would have liked to, I mean, did you talk to the head of Google or what? I mean, did you talk to the head of HR? Did you talk, I mean, that was all you got?
Yeah, that was pretty much all I got. I never talked to Sundar or any of the high level people. They delegated it to my local HR and managers.
Do you think Google thought it was going to get this big?
Definitely not. I mean, I don't think anyone thought that it would get this big because I don't know of anything that is you know that's that similar to what this became.
There isn't. How did it get so big? Would you say? What was the you got to, when you build a house, you got to have a foundation, right? So when something goes viral, it has a foundation.
Mhm.
And how did this go viral?
I guess there are multiple factors. So Google has a big target on spec, so anything that involves Google will necessarily become bigger than just a random other company. And this is a very hot button topic, so and a very controversial one where people will say exactly the opposite thing. So that was part of the drama of just how the media was misportraying things, but then that gave fuel to the fire for the other side to just talk about how much either my document was wrong or how much the media was wrong. And uh, so there were just so many stories just about that. And yeah, I think part of it too is if you read the document, it's not like this, Nazi document or anything. I at least think that it's reasonably argued, and yeah, it's never says anything horrible, but and it's sort of precisely because of that they had to overreact, and so I think there are multiple factors that led to what it is now, and it's yeah, I still don't know exactly what caused it though.
Fair enough. Next question comes from Subs, moderator. And do you encourage people to seek alternative tech options that are not associated with companies like Google who sell user data? And or do you have any recommendations?
Hmm. Yeah, I think definitely using competitors will encourage Google to be better, right? And I think it's sometimes hard with the social media sites just because you need a critical mass. And even with Google, there's so many economies of scale that they're able to serve the entire web and crawl it just faster and uh, get more data than anyone else. And so it becomes really hard for anyone to compete with Google.com or some of their other properties. I don't necessarily have any specific recommendations, but if you do have any, then you should definitely share them and at least encourage competition in this field.
Great answer. Thanks, James. Next question, kind of on that. This is kind of my own question, actually. So, what's your take on PewDiePie, the whole Nazi, and the whole YouTube thing? I mean, I think everybody wants to hear. So, what's your take on it?
So I don't really watch his videos, but I think people definitely overreacted. At least as far as I know, what happened was, he was just making commentary on what he could possibly get someone to do, and he was using like something that said "I hate Jews" or something, and just using that iconography made a ton of people upset. And I I think is just very fed up with a lot of the social justice stuff. And so he's fought back, and it's when someone as big as he is tries to fight back against this, and it creates a lot of huge struggles. And he also recently, I think, said the N word on a stream or something. I don't really have much to comment on that except that gaming, yeah, it definitely puts you in a different mindset, and he wasn't necessarily thinking very clearly when he was doing that. So I definitely don't think that he's necessarily a racist or anything.
All right. Thanks, James. Next question is from Tech Edu, longtime member here. Do you think Google has monopoly over all other search engines? And that is the question.
I don't think that they're at monopoly status yet. So in the US, I think they have about 70% market share. In Europe, it's much larger, and I think that's part of why a lot of the EU regulation has been much stronger. But there are competitors, especially local ones like in Russia, China, and Japan. But it is getting to the point where at least a direct search engine, they are the main player. I think one thing that Google worries about is that they see Facebook as another entry point into the internet. So people use Facebook more than they use Google, at least on their phone, and you can find whatever you want on Facebook too, and especially in some of the developing countries, they trust Facebook more. And Facebook also has these things where they'll pay for their internet if it's just within Facebook.com. And so there's reasons to be afraid of Facebook too in this monopoly space.
All right, thank you. Next question comes from Hyan, and are there factions inside Google, for instance, conservative, libertarian, communist groups inside the company? And are people getting along well, or do people just stick to their own groups? How is the overall company culture?
Mhm. There's definitely factions within Google. So there are secret conservative groups. There's a libertarian group, and I'm sure that there's some far left groups. Uh, I think they don't necessarily stick together physically, but there are a lot of these email lists where they can congregate. Uh, yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's gotten to the point where people are that aggressive towards each other, at least in person. But they have tried to infiltrate each other's groups online, and that has created some problems.
Thanks, James. Next question is from Social Stormtrooper, and that is, do you think gender makes people more inclined for certain professions because of biological or social factors?
Uh, oh, I think it's a combination of both. So at least the biological factors of prenatal testosterone is linked to one's interest in people versus things, and that itself is linked to career preference. And there's definitely stereotypes that also affect things. And I think, in fact, that the stereotypes are stronger for men. So there's a big stigma attached to feminine jobs for men. So being a male nurse has its own stigma attached to it. And that causes a lot of uh, problems for men, I think.
Great answer. Next question comes from Alert Lord, and that is, while working for Google, did you specifically notice any outside elements to thought control? Example, certain political options being prioritized and certain ideologies being buried.
Uh, I don't know if I saw specific examples of explicit thought control, but there were definitely room for it. And, you know, it's clear from some of the YouTube censoring that certain positions are being targeted and not others. And it's generally either a centrist or a right wing channels that are targeted more often.
Thank you. Next question comes from Derpster, and that is, what's your these the usernames I always what's your viewpoint on YouTube's lack of ads towards controversial opinions? Do you feel that advertisers should be encouraged to advertise on YouTube in general?
So is this the ads themselves being controversial?
I mean, just like I mean, essentially, I think what the user is asking, essentially, you know, Google has tightened up a bit. Well, previously it was probably a little bit tighter than they are now as far as what's allowed and what's not allowed, and you know should they allow everything in your opinion? I mean, if someone say I've got a KKK rally that starts in 3 hours, should they be allowed to post that on there, given that we already know hate speech is under the Supreme Court not considered something that is not allowed in the United States of America? So if someone wants to post something, technically they can, but Google could stop that.
Right. Yeah.
So
So
what's your opinion?
I think where not at the point where YouTube is the only place to post these things, and so I think that they the government shouldn't necessarily regulate and tell them no, you can't censor certain things, but as users, we could encourage YouTube to, you know, allow certain things if that was what users truly wanted.
All right. So the question is, do you think that I should be allowed to post a KKK fuck you black people on Google since it is freedom of speech?
Uh, yeah, so that I mean, it's definitely tricky, and it's not clear. I mean, I think if Google was truly the only thing that you could post something on, then yes. But since it's not, I think that Google still retains, some control over this.
Fair enough. I think that's right. And I think it's a good question just because it's become so large. So one could argue that it almost has become the public, right?
Right.
Um, and that's where you run into that because you see these Richard Spencers and so on and so forth that are going to these colleges and saying, you have to let us in. You don't have an option. Um, and so I think that's kind of where it's becoming. And, you know, how do you either enforce that or not enforce that? And that was kind of more the question. And essentially, do you want to allow that? So great answer and thank you. Next question is, uh, James, what do you do in your free time and what do you love to
I mean, I read a lot, and I play sports. I guess my biggest passions in life have been like Magic the Gathering and chess and other board games where I can just get obsessed over it and try to really understand the system that underlines it. So yeah, I'm a nerd.
All right. So I guess we all have to know what's your favorite magic? I mean, what's the best magic card? I mean, everybody's got to know.
Ancestral Recall is pretty good. It's you get to draw extra cards.
All right, fair enough. I had to ask that because in case I'm ever in that situation or I'm on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, I would like to know the answer. Um, and if not, I will phone a friend after and let you argue why that is the best card if it's not the right answer. Um, so the next question comes from Dick Kickham. Yes, Dick Kickham himself. Why did you choose to work for a company that has been known to spy on its customers' emails, browser history, and other online interactions done via browsers simply because they can, or to give governmental intelligence to, certain agencies?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there's necessarily employees that are spying on users just because they can. And there are a lot of rules within the company against that. So if I wanted to just look at a particular user's personal data, I couldn't. They do give the government personal data if it's related to some crime or something. But a lot of tech companies actually do that too. So I, I I think maybe some of these conspiracy theories overreach when they think about how much Google does. But again, maybe I'm also just blind to some of this because they told me that they weren't doing that, and so I believe them.
So do you think that there is potentially a hidden group of engineers uh, that nobody knows about within Google that may handle something like this,
uh,
or not even like this, really whatever. I mean, do you think there is something that most basic employees like, hey, welcome to fucking card to sign in, right? So he's a Joe Schmo. Do you think the Joe Schmoes don't know about a part in Google that nobody else knows?
yeah, that's almost certainly the case. I think even with these diversity things, there were things that most employees don't know about. And with these privacy things, there's also a lot of nuance that they don't really tell us.
All right, great. Thank you for that. Next question comes from Gigantic, and actually that's the end of it. I'll let so the next question is Gigantic. And was the apocalypse distributed equally? Adpocalypse distributed equally. What was the intended effect, and was there any pushback from Google employees?
So I guess to give some background, about this time last year, there were some like viral cases of really negative videos that were attached to some like innocent ads. So there would be an ad from Disney for their newest movie or something, but then it would be this ISIS video or something, and advertisers really didn't want their products to be associated with these videos, and that caused a lot of the current demonetization that we're seeing on YouTube. And so it's hard to say how much was like actual real outrage by the advertisers and how much of it was overreaction by Google and sort of just used as justification for some of the more activist types to lock down on some of these right-wing videos that they're seeing. But I mean, at least the initial reports were that YouTube was going to lose like $200 million based on the lost ad revenue. So they were definitely responding to something, but it's not clear. I think that they overreached.
Next question comes from Machiavelli, and it is James. What are some books you would recommend everyone read?
Yeah, I'm really bad at giving book recommendations, but I think if you're interested in at least the Google Memo, I think The Blank Slate by Steven Pinker is a really good book to read. It's pretty long, but it goes through some of the political ideas and also how that bias of believing that all differences between people is just due to socialization, how that has created and muddled a lot of waters in multiple different areas.
All right, thank you. Next question is James. What is the popular political ideology among Google workers, and does this lead to suppression of minority opinion?
Yeah, so I think that there's a decent number of libertarians, a lot of progressives, and a small number of social conservatives, very small number. And I think the ideology that's really pushed on the employees by the top and bottom is this social justice ideology. And that's the one thing that really can't be questioned. And that's why they've found my document so threatening, because it was countering that.
Thanks, James. Next question is from Shitpost, and the question is actually the user's name is Shitpost God. So it's a really good shitpost question. And the question is, do you think Google will control the autonomous vehicle market and a result control the whole vehicle market eventually?
It's definitely possible for them to be the front runner.
Did you hear that question, James?
Yeah. So they they are definitely one of the possible companies that will.
James, are you alive still, or did Google kill you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, he's talking.
Okay, so I think Google could be one of the companies that ends up controlling the autonomous vehicle market, especially since they started way before anyone took it seriously. And they are definitely interested in controlling the OS or operating system of the car. So they already started with Android Auto, but that hasn't really caught on yet. But I think that's their ultimate goal, is to control the entire experience.
All right, I'm still live.
Okay.
James, are you there?
Yeah.
I think I got disconnected. That's what happens when you're in the hills of Tennessee. All right. So, did someone ask you another question? Did I cut you off?
No.
I thought maybe you got killed by Google there for a second. Wow. Hey, even though it sounds crazy, can we both agree that it is possible? No, I'm kidding. So next question comes from Ace, who is a moderator and owner. What do you think the end game is of this SJW agenda, and why is it being pushed?
Yeah, I think a lot of people will try to create these conspiracy theories where they think that this social Marxism or whatever has been created by these French intellectuals 50 years ago, and their end game was to destroy Western civilization. And while I think they were saying some of the similar ideas, I don't think that it was necessarily planned to destroy Western civilization. And I think that there is some anti-Western civilization themes within it. I think the motivation behind what Google is doing is partly just public opinion, and that's why some of these legal cases are so important, to try to shift the public's opinion and the legal incentives that they are facing, so that they they don't need to keep playing the social justice game, and in some cases that they're forced not to.
Thanks, James. Why do you think women are biologically unsuited for work at places like Google or in the tech field?
So, I mean, I definitely wouldn't say that they're unsuited. I would say there are reasons why fewer women are interested in going in the tech field, and reasons besides just discrimination. So I think the biggest one is just prenatal testosterone causing more men to be interested in systems and understanding systems. While there are definitely women that are just as interested in this, I think there's also a case to be made that the culture isn't necessarily set up for women, and that women more are used to more cooperative environments, and especially with some of the startups, that's not what's happening. And also some of the social norms of just like women will more often concede a point to let someone else grow, or will really reaffirm each other, while men are just more assertive and are more willing to take a dominant role. And that causes more men to get recognition for some things, while women will sometimes step back. And so that's causing maybe some of the disparities in leadership.
So you mentioned women are unsuited, but they want to become one. Me personally, I would love to go to the moon and be part of NASA, but one would probably argue that I'm unsuited for that, which I probably am. So you say unsuited, but one could argue when women are in the army, maybe they don't fire off that missile that wasn't needed and kill innocent people. Maybe women, save something in wherever, and they may not be necessarily suited to the current culture. And they weren't suited to the current culture, say, in the military and many other places in the past. But they've become part of that and they've added quite a bit of value. So, do you think Google can do anything to make sure and help make women who are obviously a huge part of society? And I know you know that you've mentioned that, and your point is obviously that Google's created this culture that you're just being honest, saying, "Hey, I'm not saying I don't want women here. I'm saying that Google's created a culture where they can't succeed." What do you think Google can do to open a culture that allows for that?
I mean, I think that I a lot of these diversity things, the first thing that you have to do is make the culture more inclusive, and then diversity will naturally happen. And so I think treating men and women the same would be a good start. And also, with some of these things that we know, men and women act differently than on average, then making it so that we're actually judging people on what we want to judge them on, and rather than just judging them on how much they take credit for something, which men on average will just take more credit on things for. So I think we can make women more accepted in the culture without discriminating against people.
James, and I kind of want to mention to everyone here that has the opportunity to listen is that, I think James got a lot of heat for his memo. And I think people are like, all the feminist circle jerk fucking just cancer came out. And they were like, oh my God, I'm a feminist, fucking annoying bitch. And I'm just going to be honest with you. And we already talked about this. I know you already know where I stand. Come out with all this bullshit. Let's get Madonna on the stage and all that. And they're not understanding what you're trying to say in the memo. And instead, they focus on the fact that they said, oh, you said women are fucked. They're not going to get jobs. But instead, you said it's a culture that doesn't allow for women to get jobs. Okay. What you're actually doing is identifying the problem. And last time I checked, you can't fix a problem if it's not identified. Would you agree?
Right.
I mean, or am I reading you wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree, and I think a lot of these things are just misidentifying what the problem is and just trying to solve things through discrimination rather than solving the underlying problem.
Exactly. So they're focusing on the big issue. How many more dollars can we get where 60 cents to the dollar goes to some CEO at the top of some PAC or some nonprofit bullshit organization? So, I think a lot of people attempted to construe what you said in that memo. And it wasn't that women can't do the job. You're saying that women are not enabled in the organizations that they work in currently to do the job. So, I would like to clear that up because that was not, I think, in tell me if I'm wrong again because I changed it up there, but was that essentially what you were saying?
Yeah, and I also would try to clarify that it's not that all men or all women are have these things. It's just on average maybe uh, one gender is more affected by this than the other, and so that too is being misrepresented. Where when people are saying, "Oh, all women are being mistreated" or something, when it's just they're slightly more likely to be or something. And so that too needs to be clarified.
Did you have to do any this is the next question. Did you have to do any diversity training at Google?
So there's mandatory unconscious bias training, and then if you want to become a manager, then you're definitely encouraged to do more. And so that was partly why I was doing these trainings. Part of it was I wanted to just increase the inclusivity of my team, and also, it looks good on your internal resume. So managers are actually judged by how much they promote diversity and inclusion.
All right, great. Next question comes from, I had it, but I accidentally clicked off it. Hold on. It's McB, and the question is, do social and political issues affect workplace productivity at Google?
Definitely. I think that there are some Googlers that just spend at least half their time on internal email lists talking about these social and political issues. And I wasn't even aware of this until the memo became viral and I started seeing how much time people were spending on it. Because I was more just go to work, do my work, and then go home.
Thanks, James. Do you believe that women? Next question. Do you believe that women do not have the biological constitution to succeed in certain industries?
I definitely disagree with that statement, and I think it's wrong to lump all women together and all men together. So, I may not have the constitution to work in a certain industry, but some other person may, and so there may be fewer women that maybe have the muscle mass to be in a certain industry, but there may be some men that just don't have the empathizing skills for a different industry. And so you may see natural disparities with that, but it's never that no man or no woman could do a particular industry unless it's really specific.
So let me ask you this: do you think the feminist movement for diversity eventually goes too far sometimes?
Definitely, and I think they're blind to any evidence that is contrary to what they're saying. And so, I mean, that's partly what I was trying to give with this document, because their main mantra is that, hey, there's 50% of women in the population and 20% at Google, therefore discrimination. And I was really trying to provide other explanations for the disparity that they needed to look at.
All right, great. Thanks, James. Next question comes from Goanna, and it is. Wait, hold on. Sorry, wrong one. What is the most alarming thing you heard in the diversity training you went to?
It's hard to say the most alarming. I think people don't realize that individual hiring managers are taking into account the candidate's race and gender, as if that actually changes what the candidate thinks and acts, which is really stereotyping. I think one of the most alarming was that they had said publicly that they don't do those types of things, but then I saw in these private meetings that they do. And so, just realizing that their public communication was just wrong and they were lying to us, that was alarming to me.
All right, great. So next question is from Machine Code and is there any similarity between the show Silicon Valley, if you've seen it, with life at Google and other technology companies?
So I saw a few episodes, and there's one company, Huli, I think, that's supposed to be Google. And I would say that it does misrepresent Google, and that it's showing it as if there's these buff guys shooting Nerf guns at each other. That really doesn't happen. Maybe that happens in some startups. I don't know, but this bro culture character or stereotype that is in the media, I haven't seen that at Google at all, and I think it's really uncharacteristic of the large companies. So I would say that aspect is incorrect.
All right, thank you. If you could talk to any developer, thought, software, hardware, or otherwise in a way which impacts your life, what would you like to talk to? Who would you like to talk to? Sorry. Or what, I guess, technically.
Yeah, I would like to talk to Sundar, the CEO of Google, or Larry Page and Sergey, and really understand what was going through their head, and if they are truly ideologically driven or if they were just responding to the mob.
All right, thank you. So have you heard about the Facebook computers that started to talk to each other and then they shut them down?
No, I mean, I heard of the chat bot that Microsoft made on Twitter, though.
So Facebook had two computers that they set up that started to talk to each other, and people were able to understand them. The people that set them up, and eventually they got shut down because these computers started to create their own language to communicate. What is your take on that, and what is your take on AI?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am generally afraid of artificial intelligence. I think that these types of scenarios where they'll start doing things that we don't understand, and they'll eventually just become insanely smarter than we are, is a very real possibility, and something that a lot of people aren't taking seriously. And I think it's really also a danger of the current incentives where no one is really incentivized to take safety measures with artificial intelligence. And because whoever gets the first general artificial intelligence will be rewarded hugely, but then they may also cause the destruction of humanity in general. So it's something I'm afraid about, and I really haven't heard anything that has caused me to not be afraid.
All right, great. Hey James, one more question. We got two more questions. What? Why do you think you were fired, and do you think that the public was misled as to the reason you were fired?
Mhm. And I think there were definitely some PR reasons for firing me. If they really thought that women couldn't work with me, they could have asked my female colleagues who I had already discussed these things with, and they actually largely agreed with me. So it definitely wasn't that, and it wasn't about creating negative or harmful or incorrect stereotypes of gender, because I really don't think that they are. And every time I specifically called out that we shouldn't be treating people based on their group, we should be treating them as individuals, which is actually counter to what Google is currently doing. So they currently stereotype people, and so yeah, I think it was mostly just PR.
All right, James. Thank you again. We hit the hour mark. Thank you so much for coming. Everyone loved it. I've got one more question that we're going to close this out. And everyone, including you, will be dropped down to the open channel. And if you can stick around, I'm sure users would love to talk to you for another half hour, 20 minutes. Fair warning, everyone will be able to talk at once. Moderators will moderate it, so it won't be a shit show that I just made it sound like. So, again, you'll be dropped down if you want to stick around. Our users would love for you to stay. But here's the final question. Do you think that machines are going to pass the Turing test in the near future?
Yeah, definitely. I think that, I mean, depending on how you define the Turing test, they've already passed it. So in like chatbots, they are able to fool people into believing that they're real people.
That's it, James. We appreciate you coming. And we
Yeah.
look forward to having you here again. You're always welcome to stop by. Everybody, I will post it in here. Hopefully, James can stick around. We're going to drop everybody down to the politics chat. James, obviously, if you can stick around, we'll make sure that it's clear and people can ask questions kind of open. Would really appreciate if you did. If not, we get it. You've been talking for an hour, but everybody's going to be dropped down. James, thanks again. Everyone a part of politics, the largest politics on Discord. We appreciate you coming here and taking time out of your day to come here. Yeah, we're looking forward to having you here next time.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, James.
It was great.
All right, so what did you guys think?
That was really good. I'm
Awesome.
Yeah,
you did good. You chose some. You chose good questions.
Bravo.
You know, what I loved most about it is he answered every single one, which, you know, sometimes on AMAs doesn't happen. So James is still here. So if you guys want to ask some questions, feel free.
Hey James, could you you already answered, but I'd like a little bit more elaboration on a specific point if you could.
Sure.
So regarding like being like a one-hit wonder or people knowing you for that, are you scared that that's gonna like hold you back? Because I was more asking if in the future you're worried that you won't be known as James
There's
Damore
always that silence.
and you'll be stuck as, you know, the Google Vallow guy.
Yeah, it's definitely a fear, and yeah, I've heard of, you know, other people that were publicly ashamed of that following them throughout their life. I am trying to expand what I talk about simply because, you know, gender stuff isn't really my life passion. It was just something that they asked my feedback on, and I gave them my honest opinion. So hopefully I'll be able to talk about other things.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you like you said, I'm surprised you really want to use this to, you know, spring into, you know, really fighting for this politically. I mean, I'm sure you'll have an easy time getting a name in this domain. So good luck.
Yeah, thanks.
I have a quick question too, if that's all right. Does Google store all of my incognito searches?
So does Google store incognito searches?
Yeah, Google Incognito. You know
I think that they store the search. It's not attached to your username, but it may be attached to your IP or something like that.
Oh no. Okay.
It might be. I don't know.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Hey James, I have a special request from someone here. My old lady, and it is, where are you in the Myers-Briggs test if you've ever taken it?
Oh, INTP.
I knew you were.
Wow, hey, just before you go, bro,
Huh.
and before you say your answer, she said you were gonna be INTP. Now I don't know what the hell that means, but I gotta give her a little credit because she's standing right next to me.
Yeah, definitely INTP.
What is INTP?
So it's introverted, intuitive, thinking, perceiving. And so like most the people at Google actually were either INTJ or INTP. So INT is sort of the nerdy type. And then J versus P, sort of how I think about it is partly, how decisive you are. So J is much more decisive than P. And I think you can see that through, how much of a centrist sort of I am, of how I like to just get all of the opinions and all of the viewpoints. That's sort of very perceiving of me, I guess.
It's also like the rarest one, I'm pretty sure.
It's rare. I don't think it's necessarily the rarest, but yeah.